Sorry, we got you.
Alright, good morning everyone. We have a pretty full agenda today, so we're going to jump in and get started. You should have all received it hopefully in advance, or otherwise it's been posted online as well with the documents. So we'll start with welcome and introductions. We'll go around the room first and then we'll hit everyone on their phone. So I'm Mindy Kemp with the Division of Aging at CDHS.
I'm Donna Rogie with Otero County.
Colin Laughlin, Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, Office of Community Living.
Danielle Donway with the Benefits and Services section at CDHS.
Vanessa Fox, Larewood County.
Mark Gillies, Larewood County.
Whitney Nettleton, Denver County. Karen Campbell, Human Services, sorry, computer difficulties.
Mark Wester, CDHS, Grant Jackson, Mesa County.
Carol Johnson, Adams County.
Don Parrish, Adams County.
Andrew Blunt, El Paso County.
Sherry Ray Thomas, Boulder County.
Natalie Mall, Jefferson County.
We have some folks around the room, so if you guys can speak up so that people can hear you.
I am Keith Crossan. I'm one of the supervisors in EPS here at Brentwood County.
Melissa Emery, Rocky Mountain Human Services.
Brittany Trujillo, Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing.
Jennifer Martinez, Healthcare Policy and Financing.
Ryan Fife, Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance, Office of Community Living.
Gabrielle Fisher, Douglas County.
David Owen, Family Advocate.
Tawny Couch, parent to the disabled individual.
Maureen Welch, parent of a 10-year-old on the CES waiver, and a full-time volunteer human rights activist.
Great, and who do we have on the phone this morning?
Jared McCoy with the Office of Behavioral Health.
Wilson. There it is. Yeah.
Kimali from Keller County.
Kim Lucky from Tyler.
John Terrell with LA.
Karen Crowd from Grant County. Lori Hedrick, Phillips County.
Mark Wilkins Crowder with the Senior Entry Point in Boulder County.
Russ Guerrero, Pueblo County.
Anyone else on the phone? Alright. So the next agenda item is public comment. We do have some members of the public here today, so we put some time on the agenda for that. I would also say for those of you who are interested, we have developed a SubPAC website, and actually it's part of the whole PAC website. So the PAC and all the SubPACs and all the PAC groups now are going to be having a public-facing website that contains all the agenda and documents and meeting information. And I know that's a suggestion that Maureen had made, so we've implemented that. So we may have more members of the public joining us in the future, so we've just added them on as a sort of initial agenda item to all the meetings. So Maureen or others want to provide some public comment?
You're going to speak here.
No.
David? No?
I would say more
Over there?
so because the camera is there.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and so,
Oh, are we on webcam?
No, I'm sorry, we're not on webcam, so that's all right. I'm sorry, I don't want to take it. Could you just walk around the room? Actually, I do like to look around.
I'm sorry, I've been sitting in my car all morning. So my name is Maureen Welch, and this is my son James, and I see a lot of familiar faces from last month, but there's a few new faces, so I'm glad I brought him. James is 10, he's turning 11 next month. And he has Down syndrome. He doesn't use verbal language to speak, but he loves firefighters. That's what he wants to do, is work with firefighters, and he has a rich and engaging life thanks to all the work at HICPUF. CES, it's been a wonderful service for us. We're able to engage in a lot of things, including behavioral behavioral therapy services, which is now in the state plan. So I want to give some kudos to that. So Yesterday was Martin Luther King's anniversary of his death, and I was actually born the same year as him. I just hit my half a century, 50. And I think back on my parents when I was born and how far we've come, and then also how far we still have to go. One thing that the quote comes to me a lot is, and I have it on my website a couple of times, is that our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. So I really appreciate the engagement, the response. I know that a lot of you have been reading my newsletters, and this is what it's about. This is what a democracy is about, is listening to other people's opinions. And I know it's not always the easiest thing. I know it makes some people's jobs harder, but it's the right thing to do. And in the end, we always get a better result when more people are included. So I've listened to I Have a Dream speech also, and I have a dream for my son. And that dream is that he gets to live in the community, taking the risks that make a life a life, right? Living as full a life as he can, as independently as he can. And the concern in the community is that there's a lack of trust. How do we build trust? Well, trust is earned. Trust is an experience that people come to believe that organizations, agencies are there for them, to help them, not to take things away from them. So that's the main reason that I've really gotten involved with APS, is I've had some people that I know personally that have been affected by the overreach of APS. And I'm concerned about the registry in particular. So you've heard this before from me, and I know some of you read my newsletters. I want to thank Mindy and Mark and Peg and the whole team who have been working very hard at increasing the transparency. I really appreciate the new page. So many people have commented to me. I sent out the announcement about today's meeting and tomorrow's state board. They said, wow, we can find all the SubPAC. We have a visual, because I'm a visual person, of how the SubPAC relates to the PAC. So I just think all these things are best practices. And I know it's that darn Maureen who doesn't go away, that keeps bugging you. But I really think in the long run, it's a much better experience, not only for stakeholders like me, but other community partners. So thank you for doing that. It takes the mystery out, and I think that's part of the lack of trust, is there's that mystery. Who is APS? Are they county? Are they state? They took away my friend's adult son out of their home, and then the rumors start. So the more transparent we can be, the better for the process. We get the information out there. I will share that at the state board meeting, all the appreciation for the increased transparency, and also all the stakeholder meetings that have been held in the last, I guess about 6 weeks. Yeah, it's about a little bit over a month, right? And then I had one thing that I wanted to, where's my phone? I found this really neat meme, and I just wanted to bring it up because the transparency is great. However, there's no one at the table who has an actual input in this process, right? At HIPCUP, there's stakeholders that represent different parts of the community, and I really appreciate that going to meetings. And I think that's something that CDHS can look at to increase the involvement, because you can't create policy without the people that are affected by the policy, okay? And the Alliance is not me. I'm not a member of the Alliance. The ARC is not me. I'm not a member of the ARC. Okay? So we need a diversity of people that are able to come and be at the table and speak at the table. So an interesting little thing came up, and I guess I'll wrap up my public comment for today. So diversity asks, who is in the room? Okay, right now we have a diverse crowd, right? We have people here from different departments, different counties, and stakeholders that actually live the life that you impact with every decision that you make. That's diversity. Equity is who is trying to get into the room but can't. Whose presence in the room is under constant threat of erasure. And then inclusion asks, how many, or has everyone's ideas been heard? Well, I have 5 minutes on the agenda. I don't think that's enough time for my ideas to be heard. And justice responds, whose ideas won't be taken seriously because they aren't in the majority. So I think those are really important things to think about here, is that inclusion is great. A few stakeholder meetings to check the box on the rulemaking form is great, but true inclusion means that you listen, and that you're responsive, and that you create places at this table. I don't want to always be in the audience. People that have their loved ones taken away, I talked to one on the way over here, and she called in, but she doesn't want her name being told. The fear is thick, and I'll tell you what, I've been having some nightmares I went to the last stakeholder meeting and I found out that individuals as young as 11 years old will be put on this registry. My son turned 11 next month. We're talking about abuse, neglect, exploitation, and self-neglect charges being placed on someone like my little boy. Unbelievable. Unbelievable and not acceptable. You cannot be putting those kinds of labels on minors when there's no due process. This is an administrative procedure without the protections that you get through the judicial process. I'm very, very concerned about that. And lastly, I want to close up, and I don't know if Senator Hernandez wants to say anything. Your role is so important, and I know that you take care of the most vulnerable, so I'm getting choked up because I've had some of my students that really needed intervention. But we need to use some judgment. We need to use some realistic common sense. And I think that we've kind of gone into the mode of overprotecting in the human services world. And we've lost the fact that none of you want to have a paid person with you every minute of the day. Would you? Would you like to have someone following you around all day? Well, a lot of people in the community feel like it's unsafe for their loved one to be in the community or doing anything really without a paid person there because APS could be hovering around the corner, CPS could be hovering around the corner. You know, it's self-neglect if I trained my client to ride the light rail to go to work and then his parents or his provider or whoever is his guardian would be charged with self-neglect because he put him at risk. Life is risky. We all drove here today. That's risky. We're all going to eat lunch. We could get food poisoning. That's risky. Life is the dignity to risk. Life is the dignity to have all of the things that we want. Just because someone has the at-risk title doesn't strip them of those civil rights. So know that there have been Civil Rights Commission complaints made on this process. Know that there have been civil rights attorneys who have said that this process is completely illegal. To strip people of rights without due process, to move them and disrupt their life, who's the perpetrator there? CDHSs, the individuals that are perpetrating the harm on those individuals. So it's a paradigm shift. I know it's hard because you're on one side of the table. I think if you had more people at the table, you might be able to understand the concern in the community. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be here after the meeting if anyone would like to talk, and I appreciate the name cards, the transparency, everything you've done. I really appreciate it, but now we need to be looking at the true involvement, the true respect for the concern, and not dismissing it as anecdotal, and not having a director who says, at the JBC, it's just a couple of activists. It's just a couple of activists caught in trouble. That is so offensive. It's offensive to say it's a couple of activists because I represent thousands of people who are too afraid to step forward. Too afraid. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maureen. I think we have Rob join us. We have to get moving with the agenda, but if you want to take a few minutes, we still have some time for your comments.
Thank you, Mindy. I won't take so long. My name is Rob Hernandez, and what I'm here to do is to make sure that you consider the civil rights of this people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I know there's a rule that says, well, they don't have the capacity, but every individual in the United States has the capacity to make their own legal decisions until the person in the black dress bangs the gavel and says, no, they don't. So please keep that in mind so that some of these procedures, some of these rules that are created and made do violate those civil rights. And so please take that into consideration. But as some of these rules and regulations come forward, sometimes they perpetuate more harm than good. And that's the reality that you need to take into consideration, is that our rules and regulations actually think of the unintended consequences. Think not only 10 minutes after you make a decision, but 10 months after you make a decision, 10 years after you make a decision. What are the consequences? What are the unintended consequences that could occur as a result of that? And here's the other thing, is that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have a right to counsel just like everybody else. So if they say, hey, I'd like to have an attorney here, and even though they have the capacity of a 5-year-old, they need to make sure that they have an attorney there. But I don't see that happening. So that needs to occur. So there's some changes that need to occur within the system that to protect their rights. And I know that maybe you're thinking that there are ways to do that, but there are also ways to protect their civil rights during the process as well. So that's all I have for now, and I know you have a busy agenda. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Sure. Great. So we're going to keep the meeting moving along. We just wanted to set aside a few minutes to, first of all, review the minutes. You all should have gotten them in advance, and just want to know if there are any changes. As we've mentioned in the past, our lovely APS staff are taking minutes, but we can't capture everything. So if you missed something, feel free to let us know now or shoot us an email, and we'll make any adjustments. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
I just have one quick one. The acronym for the raise has a misplaced letter at the very bottom of the first page. It's pretty small here.
It's probably an autocorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be.
All right. So hearing other minutes feedback. Also, we wanted to take a few minutes to review the agenda for today. Does anyone have any updates to the agenda that they'd like to propose? Don't hear any. And Colin, did you want to talk a little bit about the May agenda?
Sure. So as you probably recall, in the last couple of months, we've talked about the need to have, I think, kind of a cross-section of individuals from OBH and Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing to speak broadly about the new rate structure, behavioral health, the BHOs, community mental health centers, etc., and be able to, I think, have a flexible conversation about what some of the changes will consist of and what that ultimately will look like. Unfortunately, we weren't able to align that for April. I know we had originally planned that, so I want to personally apologize to all of you. I know that was the goal last month when actually we had established that, I believe, back in February. But we had, I think, a strong desire to make sure we had the right people at the table, and we just couldn't get the right people for this month. And so it really was not a decision made in, hey, we'll push it out a month, it's fine. It was a decision made in, boy, we really want to have this conversation and make sure it's worthwhile to everyone that's involved, and I think be able to speak to some of the things that were missing from that last conversation. So accordingly, the goal is now to have that conversation in May. Laurel Karabatos, who is the Deputy Medicaid Director and also kind of the lead person on all things ACC 2.0, Ray, and kind of BHO, will be here with some of her staff. And so I thought it was critical to have her at the table and really hear what our county partners had to say and also what the questions were. And so that was the thought behind that approach. So I do apologize if that put kind of a kink in your plans, but again, the thought was to make sure that we had the right people at the table and really were able to have an informative conversation. So I think with that in mind, if you have any additional questions or if something's been percolating, Donna had mentioned when I first got here today that there was some additional questions about the raise. We do have some more time now, so if you have more questions, send to Donna, send to me, send to Mindy, and I'll make sure that those get to the appropriate people at the department to kind of inform that discussion that we have a month from today.
Any questions or? And so we did include sort of some of the tentative questions on the back of the agenda, but this is kind of a note for you that if your question's not on here, let Colin or Donna or I know. All right, with that, we're going to move into public case management. So, you guys want to, would you like us to everybody up here?
Has everyone had the sign-in sheet? I think it went all the way around. Go back to the video.
For those of you on the phone, we're going to load up a presentation, so you should be able to see it. They're going to be as close to the microphone as they can. If you're just don't hesitate to.
The transition to concrete. Yeah, that is a video. What about the second one? It's probably the third one.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Brittany Trujillo. I'm the Case Management Section Manager. I At the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, I was asked to come today to talk about conflict-free case management. With me, Jennifer Martinez, she is my division director. So that's why we're here. Our transition to conflict-free case management. I have been with the department in my role almost 4.5 years, and that whole time I've been working on conflict-free case management. But that has not been conflict-free case management. So the mission first at the department is to improve healthcare access and outcomes for the people we serve, while demonstrating sound stewardship of the financial resources given to us. Overview today, I'm going to talk to you about the past work that has occurred for conflict-free case management. It's been going on for longer than a decade. Talk about House Bill 171343 passed during the legislative session last year, and then talk about some of the next steps and work that has occurred for the past year. So previous work, as I said, conflict-free case management is not a new topic for Colorado. Back in 2007, the University of Southern Maine did a study in Colorado to address potential conflict of interest that was arising from the multiple roles of our community center boards in Colorado. That study provided several recommendations to the department. At that point, it was the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing and the Department of Human Services that were overseeing this work. Some of those recommendations talked about moving towards a more transparent system, redesigning the system, directing separating roles that community center boards have. So those are a few recommendations that came from that initial study. Based off of that study, and because of some other concerns, in 2009, the Office of State Auditor did an audit, or conducted an audit in response to the University of Southern Maine review and to legislative requests specific to the home and community-based services for persons with developmental disabilities waiver. This audit stated that the system currently, or at that point, did present conflict of interest and that both departments should work to complete and implement the plans and recommendations from the University of Southern Maine review. Fast forward to a year from that, 2010, there was a conflict of interest task force that occurred throughout the year. Various stakeholders were represented in that, families and advocates, guardians, providers, community center boards. That task force also presented additional recommendations to both the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing and the Department of Human Services. Talking about, again, separating roles from the community center boards because they were doing eligibility and intake determination for programs, providing case management, providing services. So the recommendations from that report talked about separating those out or giving those functions to other agencies or entities. Oh, sorry. Last slide still. 2014, fast forward. Yes, Maureen?
That was us, I was just saying.
Oh, yes.
You're on that task.
Yes. Fast forward 4 more years, 2014, when I began my role, Maureen and Rob were part of this task group. The department formed another task group, which was originally charged with looking at how do we provide choice of case management agency for people. The way our system is currently structured, you have single entry points, you have community center boards, and depending on what your disability is and where you live, you have to go to a certain agency. So this task group started to say, how do we look at giving choice to people in their case management? After our first meeting, Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services released a federal regulation requiring the separation of case management from the provision of direct home and community-based waiver services. So our task group said, okay, we've got to change the charge of our task group and say, how do we do this, or what does that look like in Colorado now? We've got community center boards that, again, provide case management and direct services. What do we do? So the task group met from February through October of 2014, provided recommendations to the department. The 3 main recommendations from this task group were for an agency to provide case management services only, for an agency to provide direct services only, or for an agency to continue providing both case management and direct services to the same person, as long as that person went through a informed consent to opt out of conflict-free case management, basically. Those are the 3 main recommendations given to the department. The department responded to those and said that the first 2 options, an agency doing case management or services only, met the regulatory requirements from Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, but that the 3rd did not. The regulation did not provide for the option for somebody to opt out of conflict-free case management. That was 2014. In 2015, the Colorado General Assembly passed House Bill 151318, which had multiple parts to it. One specific for conflict-free case management charged the department to develop a plan to comply with conflict-free case management and the federal regulation. The department worked throughout the year to develop that plan in conjunction with stakeholders, which included community center boards, individuals and services, advocates, guardians, families, providers, single entry points. The plan was submitted to the Colorado General Assembly on July 1 of 2016. Last year, the Colorado General Assembly passed House Bill 171343. This legislation was specific to statute that encompasses individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well as the community center boards. What this legislation did was develop a definition of conflict-free case management that included statutory or the federal regulation citation and said that same agency cannot provide both case management and direct services to the same individual. It also created a definition for eligible for home and community-based services. It also changed the definition of the interdisciplinary team to closely or to align with federal regulations for person-centered service plan development, saying that for the service plan development for a person, it includes that person, the case manager, and then anyone else that person wants to have present at their service plan development. So our statute changed to align with that regulation from the federal government. Additional highlights from House Bill 171343, as I said, it prevents the same agency from providing both case management and direct services to the same individual. It also required the department to say what are the options that community center boards have to comply with this federal regulation and conflict-free case management. Those options are to provide case management only, direct services only, to provide case management, or to discontinue providing case management and direct services. And also, this legislation requires the department to create a third-party entity to assist in choice of case management agency. So House Bill 171343, when it separated out some key functions of community center boards, that community center boards will continue to do eligibility determination for HCBS waiver programs, as well as the initial determination of a developmental disability. At the point that a person is found eligible, there needs to be a third-party entity so that people are provided an unbiased choice of who provides their case management. So that's a key piece. So the department has to create that third-party entity to broker that choice. House Bill 171343 also required the department requires community center boards to complete a business continuity plan, requiring the department to say what needs to be in that business continuity plan. So that was work that needed to happen. The federal regulation that was in effect in 2014 also allows for an exception to the rule in geographic areas where there is no other willing or qualified provider to provide the case management or services. That exception to the rule has to be approved by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So House Bill 171343 provided the opportunity for community center boards who are comprised primarily of rural or frontier areas to request that exception to the department by July 1 of 2017. And then lastly, all individuals receiving HCBS must be enrolled in a conflict-free system by June 30th, 2022. Next steps, the department is working to align all HCBS waivers with same requirements. So that's work that's been underway. How do we do that? What does that look like in Colorado? The rule exceptions, requirements for what the department would need to see from community center boards to request a rule exception were sent to all community center boards June of last year. Requests were received by July 1 of 2017. Information that we wanted to look at was, is that community center board comprised primarily of rural or frontier counties? What are the other service providers in the area, or how many are there? Those were some pieces we looked at. The department was given funding through this legislation to hire a contractor to assist in the development of the business continuity plans and to analyze the criteria for the rule exception. So that work has been underway. The business continuity plan requirements were sent to all community center boards on December 29th of 2017, and they are due to the department by July 1 of 2018. The legislation, or House Bill 17-1343, also required the department to develop qualifications for case management agency as well as case manager. The contractor hired by the department was able to do some research into other states and what their qualifications are, what's currently in Colorado, provided recommendations to the department. The department, along with the contractor, went around the state at the end of November 2017 to propose or present the draft qualifications for all stakeholders to provide input. There were 4 in-person meetings as well as 1 webinar. There was participation again from individuals and services, parents, guardians, advocates, providers, community center boards, single entry point agencies. So lots of input. The department's contractor took all that feedback, looked at everything, provided what they're calling final recommendations to the department. The department has spent time reviewing those, and towards the end of February sent those out to all stakeholders again to say, this is what the department believes those final case management agency and case management qualifications to be. If you have additional feedback, please submit that to the department. That request was due by March 9th, although we continue to receive some additional feedback and are currently in the process of reviewing what the proposed qualifications were and all the feedback to create those final qualifications. There's that. That's where we are. That's where we are for conflict-free case management and the work that's been done to make that transition. What questions do you all have?
There's no identified conflict of interest between the functional eligibility and the provision of case management, and yet it's in the case management, or the conflict-free case management sort of umbrella. Can you tell me how we got there?
Sure, so you're correct. The federal regulation does not require separation of level of care eligibility determination from case management. The department has made that choice. One, what occurred with the community center board and the IDD statute. As I stated a few slides ago, the department's working to align the process across all HCBS waivers. So one thing that the department has heard from stakeholders over the years is, well, there's been 2 things we've heard from stakeholders over the years. One is that the process for all HCBS waivers should be the same for everyone, regardless of age or disability. So it shouldn't matter what the age or disability of an individual is, they should experience the same process. So there's that piece. And second, and maybe more importantly, is recommendations from the Community Living Advisory Group, which completed its work in 2014. A key recommendation from that group was to separate eligibility, level of care eligibility from case management, from direct services, and to provide choice of case management for individuals receiving HCBS waiver services. So that's where those are the catalysts for why that's included in House Bill 18-1288, which is, I believe, what you're discussing right now.
It gives the impression to folks who weren't at that meeting that functional eligibility of case management is a conflict. Is the department saying that that's a conflict?
No, that's not a conflict. It's stemming from stakeholder feedback, which came from the Community Living Advisory Group and just other various stakeholder meetings, that there should be a separation of those 3 activities: eligibility, case management, and direct services, and that people should be afforded choice.
I remember those meetings with the advisory group, and I always kind of thought that it was almost like a couple of the things that came out of that went against each other, like person-centeredness, really taking the system and making it, streamlining it. We have like no door idea going out there now, and the choice of case management agencies and adding a broker, things like that. I mean, one of the big things that we did in the advisory group talked about way back when was, having fewest number of access points and people for an individual or family to talk to be able to get the services they need in the most efficient amount of time possible. And having all of these different bits and pieces now, it seems like it's going to make the system just far more complicated for families and an individual to get access to the services.
Well, and I think when you read the CLAD recommendations as well, it does talk about streamlining the process. And I agree with you. It talks about streamlining the process and also providing choice and also wanting and believing that choice in case management was very important to individuals, right? And so how does that happen? I think when you operationalize some of those pieces, it may get a little bit more intricate with additional partners, but how do you streamline that, make it more efficient as you're providing that choice, I think is the important piece of how you operationalize that so that it's not more convoluted and muddying the waters even more. So I think the key to that is trying to take all the different recommendations and implementing and operationalizing that so that it's not muddying the waters more. And there's ways to do that. I'm not saying it's easy, but there are ways that we can make it so that it's not more convoluted than it is today.
Can you talk about some of those ways that you haven't, maybe that's in other ways that you have talked about?
So there's been, ideas, and you can certainly talk maybe a little bit more to that, but there's certainly been ideas floating around, and we don't have a concrete, this is what we are going to do effective this date, because we want to involve stakeholders in that process. But there are ways to say, currently we have CCDs and single points. I'll give you this example. If you have an IDD diagnosis, you're going to the CCBs, and if you're elderly, blind, or disabled, you're going to go to the single entry points. Well, in the future, you're not going to be steered based on your diagnosis or your disability or your ability, right? You're going to be able to go to the SEP or the CCB to get that intake referral. So it's not going to be, nope, you have to go here, and nope, you have to go here. You're going to be able to go to that entity within your county, right? Or you have a choice. You can go to either entity because they're going to be assessing for all waivers, not just 3 or not just the other 8 or the 7, right? So it will streamline that entry point for individuals.
I also think the creation of some standards for training for those case managers is a key part of this, because if you have to go to 4 different places to get information on EBD versus SLS, it's complicated. And I think that the professionalizing of the case management is actually going to make it easier for families. So I kind of disagree with the gentleman's statement there, because if you look from the consumer side, if you can go to one person and they say, okay, well, you can be on the DD wait list and you can use EBD at the same time, and you can be on both. Now, the CCB people don't know about EBD because that's not in their wheelhouse. So I really think it's a good progress forward. So I appreciate that. And then I have one other question. If this is the best practices coming down from the federal government, is the state looking at implementing conflict-free across other silos? For example, CDHS just got, I like to say stole, but they just received the transfer of the early intervention child find, moved over from CDE over to CDHS. And potentially the same vendor could be doing the assessment as is delivering the service, which is similar to the issues we have with the CCBs. So is that something that maybe leadership or the state is looking at implementing across wider things just because it's a best practice? I'm just curious, more on the 30,000 foot view.
So I could not speak to that. That would be a question for CHS to speak to, right?
Okay.
I can only speak to the purview of the Medicaid programs that we oversee. So I think
But you are overseeing CCBs, and they're going to have conflicts in other contracts they have. Is that a concern for HCPF, that there's conflicts in other parts of those agencies?
What I would say is that I think our department would be willing to have conversations with CDHS or other state agencies that oversee that to talk about our work and as it relates to Medicaid and the programs that we have purview for. Because yes, your community center boards do a lot of other work that's outside of the Department of Medicare Policy and Financing. So if our state partners and agencies wanted to have those discussions, I think we'd be open.
Because it's
to
the
say
same.
this has been our experience and this is our work that we've done.
So it's the same consumer that might be an EI that then goes into your program. Yeah. So okay, thank you.
A question regarding House Bill 1288 and the fiscal note. There's no fiscal factor in there. And one of the concerns that I've heard about is new agencies that might pop up, for-profits, nonprofits that might want to put their get in the game with providing a case management for single point or whatever it's going to be. And if they don't have any background in single point services or potentially CCB services, or they have provided case management, who's going to train them? And so why isn't there any training fiscal impacts as far as this goes?
So the department has a trainer dedicated to case management training who is developing training and hopefully your case management attended those trainings, but is working on developing that kind of curriculum. We have what we heard as we did case management agency and case manager calls is the development of a standardized professional case management certification, case management curriculum. I know Maureen has been a part of a lot of those conversations with us, so that's something the department is exploring. We look at developing and promoting. One for all case managers, not just new agencies, but the goal for the department would be to have some kind of standardized case management modules online and different pieces that.
And there's national certifications that are available too.
Sure. And one reason I really asked that is a few years back, Rick Buff had asked kind of worked for me, so to provide training for a single point agency, kind of rapid turnover and basically all new staff because I think Rick Buff at that point wasn't able to provide the training. So they paid me some to do that, which we're happy to do at that point. So it was just kind of a little confusing when in the past, recent history, Rick Buff was not able to go and really, when a brand new agency essentially came on board and get them up and running very quickly to build certain things. So it was just a concern of ours.
Valid concern. I think a difference from the department a few years ago or 5 years ago or whatever to today is there's a whole team under me that's case management specific. There's a whole case management section or in our division that's about quality and performance that has the trainer in it. So there's a larger group of people now able to support case management agencies that I don't know that, or I don't think the department had in the past.
So the requirements that are suggested in the case management, case manager requirements are actually less than what we require. It's a little bit for that.
Sure. So there are differences currently between single entry point case manager qualifications and community center board qualifications. So the department received lots of recommendations and lots of feedback and was looking at is there a way to align those? Is there a way to pull those together? What do we do? What do we require? So again, when those were sent out in February, we received lots of feedback from stakeholders that we're currently reviewing right now to say what's the right way to go to ensure that we have professional quality case management for people. So that's what was proposed. We've gotten lots of feedback about that, and we're reviewing that.
And I come from a rural area, and it's not easy to find professional degree folks to be able to provide case management to, to this complex population. But I'm thankful that you're considering some of that feedback, and the diminishing of the requirements I don't think necessarily helps us. I mean, it might make the pool bigger, but does it make the quality better? And I will be the first to admit, just because you have a degree doesn't mean that makes you a higher quality person.
Right.
But just to think about that.
And we're hoping that, not hoping, but we are aspiring to the fact that our case management training curriculums and our certifications will help with a lot of those quality pieces. As far as quality case management is concerned, can you give me an example of specifically, it was this and now it's this, which is our concern?
4-year degree versus a 2-year degree. I think a widening of the scope of the degree, so computer science versus a larger potential. That was, I think, the first line. There were 3 or 4 things, and a number of us have provided feedback. I don't have it in front of me right now, but again, the pool is hard. It's hard to fill those positions, but I think it's important to really step. If we're looking at stepping it up, then we should stand.
And I want to just mention that because that was one of the hard pieces for me was the 4-year degree versus 2-year degree, and I agree with you. It doesn't mean because you have a 4-year degree you're a rock star, and if you have a 2-year degree you're not going to be a great case manager, right? So what we've heard in feedback is that some of the rural areas would not be able to hire individuals if it only required 4-year degrees. So they would be, right, really hard pressed to find staff, right? So we're hearing some of, right, so on the opposite spectrum, that's what we're hearing from some. On the other, it's like you have to have 4-year degrees and maybe right? So we completely understand both sides of those and we're trying to come to a
Currently in the single entry point part, if you can't find somebody who has the prescribed degree or the 4-year, but you're like, this person is a rock star, they've got, you've interviewed, you've got all of that, then we submit a waiver. We submit a waiver to the department reviews it and says, yes, Otero County, you can hire this person who has a physical education degree because X, Y, and Z. And so I think that there are ways to get around it with, to serve what we need to serve and to make the pool good, rather, without just, without making a blanket, okay, it's going to be too hard, so we're going to lower the bar.
And I agree with that. I think the other piece to that is some agencies we've heard from say they don't want the department to tell us who to hire, right? But if we interview someone with a 2-year degree that has these experiences, we should be able to hire our own staff, right? It's our agency. So we've heard that too. So we're trying to figure out how much should the department be involved in hiring practices of local agencies, and how much do we want to take on as, right, that practice? Not that we don't want to. It's like there's that fine line though of agencies not wanting involvement and others wanting just the 4-year degree, no other, right? So I understand.
So I was taking notes. Can you don't want department involvement? No, they won't bother.
Pick your department.
I think one of the other concerns I've heard from counties, including myself and Mesa, is that if we were to lower the qualifications, then it's going to jack up our entire, like where we actually, our case managers sit in our
Organizational structure in HR.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to get the qualifications for their associate's degree. That would be a lower level of case management, and therefore every senior case manager that we now have on the signature point would take commissions, and they would do that, and we would likely lose all those people. And that's something I've heard from several years.
Do you, Grant, 1 second, Marty, but do you know if you or other counties that have that issue have submitted that kind of feedback?
Yeah.
I don't know that I saw that specifically. Is that fine? If you wouldn't mind if you have, okay. It's fine. Okay.
Recently.
So your preference would be, what I'm hearing, is to still have that waiver piece.
That's always worked for us in the past. We've never had a big issue with that. And I think the part of what you're referencing with people not wanting the department to tell us who we can hire has been stuff that's been written into our contracts of the department would be able to say whether or not we have to let somebody go if they feel their performance is bad. I think that's what those comments came to.
I think it's important to remember that looking at conflict-free case management in the current environment, which is a oligarchy of 20 state-approved community center boards that does not allow other case managers that are independent to come into the state and open up shop, it's going to be a different environment, okay? Brittany can open her own case management agency and directly get certified from the state. And you can have half as many caseload as you would at Rocky Mountain Human Services and make twice as much money because your money is not going to the executive directors and all of that infrastructure. So it's important that we look at the fact that we're actually going to have a true capitalistic competition market. Right now we don't. So I think that if we are looking at case management only through how it is now, we're really limiting the reality that's going to happen. We cannot control, the federal government's not going to let us. That's all. We've got to change, and if you want to open up case management, I tell my case managers, open up your own shop, you're awesome. Go for it. And they should, and they can apply directly to Brittany and HICPUF and get their certification, open up their shop, and run their own agency, and that's how it should be. So I can pick someone that specializes in Down syndrome. Another parent can pick someone that specializes in autism. There's niches within the community that are not being served by generalists now. So anyway, that's my little thing from our 9 months of torture in that task force.
Maureen, I'm going to interrupt you there. And so just a reminder, this is a meeting of the SubPAC, so we have time at the end. We can have additional public comment.
Okay, sorry, she was gone on me, so.
Yeah, so the purpose of this is really to get feedback from county partners for the state.
No, I don't
We
matter.
utilize the time.
Yeah, my opinion doesn't matter.
So my question that I have was about, you mentioned that you had a consultant that looked at other states. And what were some lessons about what other states are doing? And also with that, in the 2007 University of Southern Maine review, you said in their recommendations was transparency, redesign, and separating these roles. So my question is, I'm almost wondering, like, are we solving the right problem? You know, like, if there's a redesign question, what were the recommendations in that redesign recommendation, and what are other states doing?
So, in terms of case management qualifications, most states are requiring at least a bachelor's degree. Some require a master's degree. I think there was maybe one out of the states that they looked at that didn't require a degree, which I don't think. So, but most are requiring at least a bachelor's degree for case management qualification in terms of education. The 2007, I got all more of my notes about what I didn't want to read all of them to you because it's a lot, but
I understand.
it's
just really interesting that the redesign, like, what were the recommendations around that? Because there might be even a broader kind of systemic breakdown that makes this a difficult. If we're trying to change this piece of the system, what are the other implications around that, right? So
system redesign was direct services are separated from other roles that community center boards serve. And that was the biggest piece of the system redesign, was really separating that direct service from the 2007 review. The 2010 task force, though, included separating eligibility from the case management from the direct services. That was from the 2010 conflict of interest task force, which then aligned with the 2014 community living advisory group recommendations, which really are the more recent, here's the system redesign for long-term services and supports recommendations.
So we're at about 10 minutes over. So if you actually, I think on the next slide or either the last slide, Brittany and Heather's emails on there. So I think if you have additional questions or have additional comments, certainly sending an email directly to you. Brittany, is that the best way to...
Myself or Heather. Heather is on my team. She couldn't be here today, but she manages all the day-to-day conflict-free case management work. But yeah, myself or Heather, either way.
I have my card if you want it, as well as come up here, but I think glad to have it. Sorry, Tom.
No, you're good. You're good. Just trying to keep us on schedule here. But I mean, I think obviously the conversation is still going. So we want to be collaborative on this. So please let your thoughts be known to Brittany, Heather, and Jen. Any last questions or kind of before we wrap this up? All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, all right, perfect. So just wanted to share with you all some information related to some proposed rule modifications that came out of our Aid to the Needy Disabled task group. Are you all familiar with a little program that could aid to the needy disabled? Great. If you have questions specifically about eligibility requirements, please let me know. Anyway, a group of state staff, county partners, as well as community folks came together to kind of talk through some areas of the A&D rules that seem to potentially be barriers for the recipients or the county and or the county departments. There is an infographic if you want to pull that up as well that kind of also walks through the changes. Thanks, Andrew. So there are 3 different rules that we are going to be proposing modification to at state board. These will also be reviewed through the Economic Security SubPAC as well as the PAC groups as well. Wanted to bring this to you all just so you were aware of them, and if you have additional questions or comments to let me know as also. But the first rule that we're looking at is related to the SSI application requirement. So currently, individuals are allowed or required to submit proof of SSI application within 10 plus 1 days of that request for verification. That's for individuals who aren't receiving any assistance from a guide or a navigator. Individuals who have been working with guides or navigators have up to 60 days to provide that verification. Well, our little work group identified, you know what, that really seems to kind of be a little unfair to the individuals who don't get extra help.
And so what if we looked at, changing that or modifying that to just ensure that everybody's allowed enough time to complete a thorough SSI application, it would seem to kind of level the playing field a little bit, right? So one of the things that we're recommending is that we're going to change that 10 plus 1 day for SSI application, and we'll allow for up to 60 days for SSI application. And during that 60 days, the applicants will receive what would be considered presumptive eligibility, so they would still receive benefits for the A&D program during that 60-day time frame. Any questions on there, or am I good to move on to number 2?
This was, I think, a one-time exception, right, Danielle?
That's correct, Andrew. So we had talked about, okay, well, I got my 60 days, and so I don't comply with that SSI application. My case gets denied. What is to prevent me from coming in next month and getting my new 60 days of benefits? And so at that point, we determined that it would kind of revert back to this 10 plus 1 time frame for the individual to provide proof of SSI application, and they would receive benefits until they provided proof of that SSI application. The next one is related to the Med-9 requirement. So the rule currently has I know this is going to floor you all, but there's a little contradiction in rules related to the time frame that an individual would have to submit their Med-9. It references both a 45-day requirement or a 10 plus 1 day requirement. And so it could be kind of confusing, right? So we are looking at aligning our rules to allow for a 30 plus 1 day time frame for the individual to submit the Med-9, while also clearly indicating that if they need additional time, due to not being able to get into that medical provider within that time frame, the county departments will be working with them also. But obviously, Med-9 certification by that medical provider is certainly something that is outside of the customer's control. None of us have any ability to have any control of when we're going to see our doctor. It's all at their whim and when they can fit us into an appointment slot. And so we determined that the 30 days was a more tenable option than a 10 plus 1 option for customers. Any thoughts or questions about that? All right, the last one, and this is where we got probably the biggest cheers from both our county partners as well as our community folks on the group, was related to the Med-9 form itself and what's called the matrix. And it's not, as I joked last month at Economic Security SubPAC, it's not matrix in a fun Keanu Reeves kind of way. The matrix as it currently is, I know it's cheesy, but I can't help myself. So the matrix as it currently is, if an individual receives a determination by their medical provider that they're not necessarily totally disabled, but are considered disabled from a 6 to a 12-month time period and are not able to work in the community, the county departments currently have to complete what's called the matrix, where they look at other social factors to determine whether or not that person is considered disabled for the purposes of this program. It's been a little bit of a challenge, I think, for our county partners to really know how to consistently and fairly score that matrix. So individuals were either getting potentially denied inappropriately, or because they weren't sure how to score it, they were saying, I'm going to score everybody at a 3, and so potentially there were people who shouldn't have done it that were getting approved as well. So we've determined to take a look at that Med-9 form in the matrix and eliminating the matrix as a specific tool, and we're going to utilize the social factor verbiage from statute into the revised Med-9 so that that's going to be determined by the medical provider. So the medical provider will be saying, hey, because of other social factors such as age, training, etc., this person is not going to be able to work for a duration that I'm specifying as that medical provider. So, our county partners were really excited because they wouldn't have to make that determination, and
it would be based on what the physician was determining. So we're pretty excited about that change. Any comments or questions about that? All right, well, those are our exciting changes in a nutshell. Any other questions about the E&D program?
Can you just remind us, you're going through Economic Security Center?
Correct.
Yeah, so just if anyone has any confusions, Danielle agreed to present to this group because the Aging and Adult SubPAC, but they kind of cross over, and so they'll be going through that approval process. So we don't need to vote here or anything, but she, thought it would be great for her to. That's all.
Danielle, I don't know, I don't fill out the boxes, and I don't receive the form, but I know that I have had a couple of folks that say, if we have a primary care physician, but their disability is perhaps mental health, and so the mental health provider doesn't feel qualified to fill out the big form because it's sort of beyond all, their little scope, but the primary care physician doesn't feel comfortable because the disability is mental health, and I don't do mental health, and so we've had some folks who like, where do I go to get this? Where do I go to get this signed? I can't find a doctor to sign it because my PCP won't sign because it's mental health. My mental health won't sign because it's it's bigger than that. Do any of those help address that, or not?
So number 3 helps address that, and part of what we're going to be doing as a work group is redesigning the Med 9 itself to modify that language, as well as just look at the form in general to try and eliminate some of that confusion. The current form, which, it's interesting that that's the communication that's being put forward by your providers, because currently on that form specifically, it does list qualifying disabilities. And one of the disabilities that is considered a qualifying disability are mental health diagnoses. So if a psychiatrist, mental health provider, would check that box and check total disability, that would be an acceptable form. So I'm not sure exactly where the confusion's been, but I think that one of the other things that we're also doing too is we're providing kind of a cover letter that will hopefully explain to the providers in a little bit more simplistic language, like what we're actually expecting from them as medical providers, because I think some of the struggle as well has been to say, from a rehabilitation perspective, I hate saying Colin is totally disabled, right? Because that indicates that he can never be treated or receive rehabilitation or things of that nature. So there's been some struggle on providers to say, yep, this person is totally disabled. And so we're trying to educate them that, for the purposes of this program, that's just what you're indicating on this form. That doesn't mean that they can't seek other treatment or be rehabilitated. So, but yes, we are redesigning the form, so we'll take that into consideration. That's all.
Thanks, Danielle. So we're a little bit behind schedule, not too bad though, so I'm catching up. So next on the agenda we have PACE. So we have Brian here to talk to us about this. And we're just going to turn it over to Brian.
Good. Hello everyone, my name is Brian Fife. I am the PACE Program Administrator for the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing. Just a little background, I have been in this role for going on about 3 years. It's been a lot of changes in the program. I have been through all the changes. So my goal today is just to give you kind of an overview of the PACE program. The PACE stands for Program for All-Inclusive Care of the Elderly. So with every presentation, I like to start with our mission statement of the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance. And that is to improve healthcare access and outcomes for people we serve by demonstrating sound stewardship of financial resources. So with this overview, let's just jump in. What is PACE? I know a lot of people are confused by what the PACE program is, so I want to try to give you the background of the PACE program. And it is a program created by CMS that is a coordination of Medicare and Medicaid. The goal of the PACE program is to provide all-inclusive care for the elderly, in which they provide any service that is under Medicare and Medicaid, and they coordinate that care for that service. So, next slide. Let's go to who can join PACE. So there are 4 different criteria. First one is you have to be 55 years old. This is a requirement that is created by CMS. This is not a requirement created by the state. The second is you must live in the service area of a PACE organization. And how the service area is defined is by zip code. It's not by county, it's not by region, it's by zip code. So a PACE organization, there could be two PACE organizations within one county, but they can't share the same zip code. So there can be overlap in the county, but not overlap on a zip code. Second, just like with all HCBS services, you must meet a level of care, and that level of care is nursing home level of care. And last is, you must demonstrate, or the provider must feel that you can live safely in the community while they're on their services. This is the only requirement that is determined by the provider on there. And if anybody is deemed not eligible because of this requirement, those denials are sent to the department to be reviewed by the department for appropriateness. So just a little background on PACE eligibility. We already talked about, there's two departments that are kind of determining eligibility at the forefront. And that is the single entry point and the county department. So the single entry point, as everyone knows, makes the functional eligibility determination. They make sure that they meet under the ULTC 100.2, that they meet nursing facility level of care. And second, the county makes sure that they have the financial eligibility to be within the PACE program. And that's only for individuals that are on Medicaid. You could be on the PACE program being Medicaid only, Medicare only, or private pay, or dual eligible. I will tell you, pretty much 99% of individuals on the PACE program are dual eligible. So with that, you just have to meet the same standards as HCBS services. That's 300% above the Social Security income rate, which is about $2,000 per individual to $3,000 per couples. And PACE allows for the community spouse resource allowance. So how PACE services are delivered. I think this is the most unique part of the PACE program. The PACE program has what, by regulation, what they have to have is an IDT, that's interdisciplinary team. And within this team, they are required to have certain type of disciplines within there, such as your primary care physician, registered nurse, social worker, therapist, just a wide swath of individuals that all look at the care plan for that individual. So once somebody enrolls into the PACE, there's an initial assessment. They go to all these different type of disciplines to get assessed on what the kind of care need they need. So once they get assessed, all these individuals meet together and they plan the care for that individual. They identify the services that they need, how much they need those services, and this is all being done with the opportunity for the individual to be associated with that care planning. So these are some types of services being provided by PACE. I can't stress enough that when we say all-inclusive, it is an all-inclusive program. There is any service, regardless if it's medical or not, that PACE can provide under that capitated rate that we do pay PACE. The only limitation that they, well, not limitation, requirement that they do have is that they must provide services that are medically necessary, that are covered under Medicaid and Medicare. So if there is any determination that someone must have this service, they cannot deny that service because of cost. They must provide that service. But they can go above and beyond to that. So when we're talking about the PACE program, it's a continuum of care. So once somebody enrolls into the PACE program, they're on the PACE program for their whole entire care of life. So if that individual at one point needs long-term care placement, they could go into a nursing facility, but they go in a nursing facility while on the PACE program. There's no disenrollment from the PACE program and then into the nursing facility on there. So they stay within that program the whole time. So there's incentive for the PACE program to provide these home-based services because, as we know, sometimes the nursing facility is costly. We pay the PACE program one capitated rate. There's no increase whenever the individual goes to the nursing facility. So the PACE program at that point is on the hook to pay that nursing facility. So they focus a lot on home and community-based services, home health services, personal care, and things of that nature. Where is PACE? So we have 4 PACE providers currently active right now. As I know, a lot of you probably know is Innovate. You probably see their vans driving around, you see their commercials. They make up about 2/3 of our participants that are on the PACE program are with Innovate. And they're currently in Denver, Thornton, Aurora, Lakewood, Loveland, and Pueblo. The next one is Volunteers America. That's our Western Slope rural area provider. They are in Delta and Montrose counties. They're probably, well, not right now. Our smallest provider just came online in March 2017. The next one is Rocky Mountain PACE, El Paso County, and True Community Care is the one that just came on March 2017. And they are serving Boulder and Lerner counties. And once again, when I say counties, it's not the whole county. It is the zip codes within those counties. And then I think within this year or next year, Hope West will be opening up to serve Grand Junction. So this is the PACE census data. I put a approximate number because this data fluctuates. So you don't know who's disenrolling on the program, we do, so it kind of fluctuates daily on that aspect. So currently we're approximately around 4,000, which is a growing number as we have a new provider in, they are increasing their census every month with that. And then we have a new provider that's going to be coming online. So you'll probably see this number climbing pretty regular. It's always been climbing steadily throughout the year. It's usually about, I think there's about 50 new enrollees each month that are going into the PACE program. And as you see with InnovAge that's increasing more marketing, that you might see that number increasing on there. And as I said, InnovAge has about 2/3 of the population, if not more, which is about 3,000 plus. So I ran a couple of data numbers. I ran this last year, so I don't know exactly how current it is, but it will be around these numbers. So the average age of somebody enrolling into the PACE program was 74 in 2015, and that was slowly going down from a high of 79 in 2007. The median age is 77 years old of the individual that's on the PACE program, and usually they're on the PACE program for 26 months and within there. So, here are the 4 major changes in the PACE program that we're currently doing. PACE for profit has been a bill that was passed, so CMS released a study report probably about 4 years ago. In that study report, it was kind of inconclusive, but they said they couldn't find anything wrong or anything right with having a PACE for profit, because before that, you had to be a nonprofit organization in order to be in the PACE program. Because that report said there was nothing wrong or nothing right, our state passed a bill that allowed for PACE to be for profit. So we had the first organization in the country that decided to convert from nonprofit to for profit. Currently, right now, there has not been any changes within the service delivery or anything with that. It has been the same since they converted. So we have not seen any problems coming up for profit. The second is the Innovation Act. So the Innovation Act is going to be, we don't know exactly what's going on. Ever since the new administration came in, it's been pretty much a hold steady with CMS right now. Created with the Innovation Act allows you to do a pilot program to kind of change the eligibility requirements for the PACE program. So currently what they did look at is opening it up for individuals that are 21 years or older who have physical mobility. But they released out a request for comment. We all provided comments. It's been silent ever since the new administration, so we don't actually know what's going on with the Innovation Act, but it's something to keep your eyes open for, because I think the goal of CMS is to continually expand the PACE program to allow for more individuals to enroll in that program. So when they're looking at this Innovation Act, they're not looking at just taking the current model and just applying it, but taking the current, like parts of the current model and creating kind of new models within the PACE program. Next is the PACE Ombudsman program. So whenever there's a conversion from innovation from nonprofit to for-profit, the department requested that those funds that's coming from that conversion and wanted to create Next 50 organization. As part of that, we also asked for an ombudsman program to be created. That has been wonderful. Leah McMahon is currently the state ombudsman for PACE, and she has been providing great advocacy to the clients of on the PACE program to ensure that they are getting the services that they want. And last is the department has created the PACE Advisory Committee. So with the PACE Advisory Committee, we have members from all the providers, different departments, as well as the community coming in to talk about the policy changes for PACE. So one of the three major policy changes that we're looking at is service area expansion. So currently, as I told you, it's one PACE provider per zip code. So we want to look at, is it feasible to have more PACE providers into the same zip code? And that might not be true for the rural areas of VOA's at, but for Denver Metro, there's such a large population that actually qualifies for the PACE program. We want to ensure that there's ability for additional PACE organizations to serve that population if they so want. The second is subcontractor requirements. So the PACE program, how they work is kind of like a managed care organization. Instead of contracting out everything, they do a lot of internal services, but certain services they have to contract out. So we just want to ensure that those contracts, the subcontractors that they have, are meeting the requirements that are set forth by CDPHE or HIPAA that ensures the health, safety, and welfare of the clients. as well as ensuring that these individuals still have access to all those different services out there. And last is the enrollment process. So we want to make sure that the enrollment process is a smooth process, that everything is going, meeting the deadlines as necessary, because PACE is kind of different because you only can enroll at the first of the month and disenroll at the last of the month. So that kind of makes a little bit of logistical nightmare, ensuring that people that want to disenroll immediately at the end of the month, try to get them back on a service, because there's that lag time between where a single entry point has to go out and redo a functional assessment. So we want to look at their own process to make sure that there are no lag times, that when people disenroll, they're immediately back on the service, as well as people enrolling into the program. We want to make sure that PACE is able to enroll a swath of the individuals, whether they're high acuity or low acuity, and be able to serve those individuals for the continuum of their care. So that's pretty much the overview of the PACE program. So now we're at the questions part. So if you have any questions on the PACE program, feel free to ask me right now. Yes?
I have a couple of questions. I think we don't have PACE in our area, so
Yes.
I'm not super familiar with it. But I think one of the slides said that a person can be Medicaid only, Medicare only, dual eligible, or private pay.
Yes.
And then later it talks about the 2,000 and 3,000, which insinuates that you have to be Medicaid eligible. So if I'm private pay, what does it cost me?
So the private pay, what they charge you is the capitated rate that Medicaid set and Medicare set. So how the payment to the organizations are determined is that we create a capitated rate based upon what the average cost of that individual would be outside the PACE program. And that's usually around about $4,000, variables with different kind of eligibility requirements, different geographical. And then Medicare also puts a portion in, and that's usually around $4,000. So that's their limit of what they could charge. They could charge below that, but that's as high as they could charge. Is probably for a private pay, it's about $8,000 a month. That's why you see most of 99% of them are dual eligible within the program.
This is a broader question, but like you mentioned CMS, the innovation, and when they're trying to expand the scope of the program, do they usually increase the funding specific to that, or do they just cut up the same pie into smaller pieces?
No, they changed the funding for that. So they identified what the program is, and how we kind of do the funding right now is look at those individuals, if they're not on the program, what the cost of those individuals would be to provide that level of service to. So Medicare will do the same thing. It's they look at the risk of what that cost of that individual would be and create a whole new rate structure for that kind of population.
But they don't add money to that. I mean, I'm
So,
saying, if you have $100 million for X, right, and you add a program on and expand the population, and don't add that to that pot of money, then it's shrinking the money available for other programs.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, they do add the money to that.
Okay.
Therefore, they do develop like kind of grant programs in order to get providers in, and that's a whole separate funding stream.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes.
Ryan, I know some people at the table are familiar and certainly get fiscal notes and some of the activity at the Capitol. Can you real quick recap the CBMS bill, because it does certainly, I think, impact some of the counties and what would happen if that were to pass, and I think maybe explain where we're positioning ourselves on that.
Yes, so currently at the Capitol, PACE organizations have ran a bill for direct CBMS access, read-only access. So what they want is to have the ability to go into CBMS, look up a client, see the eligibility of that client, and whatever other information that's associated with that client. The reason behind that is that they feel that they're unable to make eligibility determinations because an individual who is on the program for a month, we pay them for that month. So if anything happens to the eligibility at that point, they may be out of money. So they want to make sure that there's always someone looking at eligibility of that client. Unfortunately, the department doesn't think that this is going to solve their problem at all, because still they have to work with the department, they have to work with the single entry points, have to work with the county in order to get these things changed within that program. So just looking at it doesn't provide them any more access than the ability to change that access, which they have to do. So the department is currently against that bill. What we're trying to do is provide that information to them through a more secure source, which is through the department, which we've done these data reports for them on a monthly basis, to show where their population is and the eligibility of that population, and to ensure that these people are enrolled and payments are being processed to these PACE organizations. there any more questions?
Could you say a little bit about what the ombudsman has been hearing about some of the challenges or drawbacks, issues?
Yeah, so it hasn't really, none of the issues have really changed. It's always been the most common issue. The main issue with them is transportation, trying to ensure that individuals are not sitting on the bus for long periods of time, or if they are being picked up for transportation, they know where they're going. I think that is mostly, I call it transportation, but it's mostly a communication problem. That the PACE organizations need to get better at communicating to the population when they're being picked up, where they're going, things like that. There hasn't been any real systematic issues that the ombudsman has ran into. It's mostly been kind of those individuals who want to be more aware of the services that have more stake in their services that they're being provided. But I can tell you this, that it has, things are growing, they're taking like common theme issues with ombudsman. Right now there's only 2 ombudsmen. They are overworked right now. There are a lot, since we rolled out the ombudsman program and got the education out to all these individuals, they now have a resource to go to file these grievances, because historically, the grievances were filed with the program itself. So you're pretty much telling your boss, I don't like how you're treating me, which is could be a dead-end street on there. Or so now they have a kind of independent organization that they could go to and file these grievances, which then Leah is taking all these grievances to try to find common themes and systematically working with the department on trying to create these policy things. And she always comes to this PACE advisory committee and presents these common themes to try to prevent best practice at the PACE advisory committee, so we could talk to it as a whole group.
So there's some other things besides the transportation that have been emerging or part of that.
But it's always been the same common things, such as going to the center too much, going to the center not enough. It's always about communication is kind of the primary focus. Yes, there's little parts of it, but communication from the providers to ensure that these individuals are aware of what the services they're providing and that they have the right to be a part of their care planning. Are there any more questions?
I just want to plug, if you do have an interest and you have within your county or zip codes or however you want to divvy that up, if you do have a desire to get involved with that PACE advisory committee, you do meet monthly, or your county does meet monthly with them, and over the next couple of months, I think we're going to be diving into some pretty significant issues about the future of PACE, and so it would be great to have that perspective if you're willing or someone on your team is willing to come to those who have outside representation. As you can imagine, it's a lot of the providers and some of their lobbyists, and then Brian and an ombudsman. So if we can get more people there to kind of have those conversations about the future of PACE and subcontracting and how we're ensuring people are getting the services that they need, I think it would go a long way to really ensuring that PACE will be the viable and successful program that we'd like it to be into the future.
Thank you. There's no more questions. On the next slide is all my information, which is my address, Brian5, BRYAN.FIFD at state.co.us. So always feel free to ask me questions, send me concerns that you have, or anything you want to learn about Facebook. Thank you. Thank you.
Moving right along, the next item on the agenda, this is maybe for those on the phone, is an update from me on the stakeholder meetings and the rule packets. So we've been trying to do this every month just to keep you informed of where primarily the rules related to the implementation of House Bill 171284 are in the process. So I'm just going to kind of do a quick recap for you all and see if anyone has any questions. So as you probably remember, we have had 3 rule packets that we've been working on related to the APS program that are necessary to implement the bill. So I think we reported last month, but rule packet 1 did pass state board in February, and the one thing to note on that is that we do have some APS rules as a result of that as of April 1st. And so I think we've included those in the weekly update. So everyone in the APS world has updated version of those rules. They're also posted on the APS task group website, the updated version. And then rule packet 2 is the one related to adding due process and all the rules around that. So Mark, Peg, and I will be at State Board tomorrow, presenting those to the State Board for their second reading, and hearing any questions they have and addressing that. The one thing that I wanted to note on that is that we had drafted severity levels into that, and so we've been incorporating that a little bit into some of our communication with the counties, and that will be part of the investigation process. But until those rules get passed, the severity levels isn't final. So we'll find out more tomorrow about the direction the State Board wants to go with that, and we'll be communicating back out to APS folks in the counties on that. So stay tuned. And then we'll also sort of let this group know what the outcome of tomorrow is, so you kind of have some update on that. And then rule packet 3 is the one that relates to how the employers are going to do the CAPS checks. That's the one we passed here in SubPAC and PAC last month. And so that's going to the State Board May 4th for first reading, and probably in June for second reading. And we are still kind of putting the final touches on that packet. It has to go to the AG for a final look through. And so that will go out to the State Board sometime in the next month, so that they have it in advance of the May 4th meeting. And we'll be presenting that there for first reading on May 4th. And I can also, on that one, send you the most final version. There have been a few changes that we've made since it was passed here in SubPAC and PAC last month. And so I can send it out to you all to highlight any areas that are different, so you don't have to compare versions. And you can see what those differences are. Nothing I think that would be super wide as drastic changes. So that's the rule packet status, and you're always welcome to give us feedback from the State Board tomorrow as we have some free time. We also are going to be doing an APS 101 for the State Board. One of the things that we ran into in February when we brought one of the rule packets to them is they had a lot of questions. How does APS work? What happens in this case? And so we put together an APS 101 that we're going to give to them before their official meeting tomorrow. So they have like a work group time at 8:30. So we're going to go share that with them and answer any questions they have. And then in terms of stakeholder meetings, we have done 3 stakeholder meetings in the month of March specific to the APS program and these rule packets. And so on March 8th, I think I had sent you all the notice of them, but we did an APS 101 for stakeholders. At each of these, we've had about 10 or 15 stakeholders, some in person, some on the phone. And so we just did an APS 101, answered general questions about the APS program. On March 13th, we reviewed Rule Packet 2 to gather feedback on that and the due process rules and how that works. And then on March 28th, just last week, we did the same thing for Rule Packet 3. So we walked through all of those rules and got feedback on those. And so that's kind of where we're at. We feel like we've done a lot of outreach and gathering information, and then as we do with the feedback from counties, we take all of that into consideration and make any tweaks we want to make, any changes to the rule packet, and develop a final packet that goes to the State Board. I think that's basically it. The other thing that we have done, I think I've mentioned in previous months, is we've reached out specifically to employers, because as you know, hospitals, home care association, other groups like that are really required to do the checks. So we've made sure that they are aware that they can provide us feedback. I will tell you, gotten some feedback in writing from that group. Some have attended various stakeholder meetings that we've had for them to give feedback. I've had some individual conversations with like hospital association to talk through the issues. So it's been a good way to get feedback from that group as well, and we've incorporated their feedback too. So that's kind of where we're at with all of that. Does the group have any questions or? And then I'm actually gonna ask Peg to do a quick update on the task group before we jump into the allocation stuff.
I was just wondering, has the county heard any feedback from concerns from citizens or stakeholders at the local level? Or providers. John, you guys have anything?
Well, I know there's different things that we have caught wind of peripherally around the background check, piece of it. I think there's, just a level of anxiety or feeling the burden on some of those smaller programs and things like that.
Yeah, the cost.
Yeah. But nothing beyond that. And more questions and concern, I think, about how it's going to play out.
Okay.
Well, the APS task group hasn't met since February. We didn't meet in March, we're not gonna meet this month. We're kind of in a holding pattern because we're waiting to see what the board does with these rules, and we're waiting for some additional guidance on practice change. But what we do know is that there is going to be some practice change. There are some kinds of reports right now that EPS is screening out that they will no longer be able to screen out. It will require an investigation going forward. And so we're trying to get some final details so that we can have that information for the task group. And we're hoping to have that for the May task group so that we can kind of finalize what we need to do as far as guidance to the counties on that process going forward. We are, once we get through all of this, then we'll turn our attention to other things that are kind of in the parking lot. But right now, we're just trying to get through everything that we're trying to get done now. Changes to the CAP system are ready to go. We will start testing next week. We're still looking for volunteers at the county level to help with testing for changes that are going on with CAPS. So if you have a worker that's kind of tech savvy or one that struggles that could, help us try to break the system before we go live across the state, that's always helpful because social workers are great at breaking into the system and finding the bugs. And that makes sure that when we go to production, we don't have those problems. And so then the plan is right now to roll those changes into production the first weekend of May. And that way, you guys are kind of familiar with how the new data model looks and how that works before things become official on July 1. Would you talk to Tanya?
They're the ones that reach out to, you're talking about people who are either savvy users or uncomfortable users. Yeah. Burnett from Crowley County. Really? Just because she was the one that reached out to us and said, we don't want to manage our cats, we are wrong. So, can you do all of our? Because they have 2 or 3 reports a year. If that. Yeah. If they have the capacity to, kind of test those folks who get one a year, they might be good ones to reach out to, right? For sure. Not to throw her under the bus, but that's just, she's not the only one. She's not the only one. It's my local one, there's a lot. There are some others, and we will actually get on the phone and talk them through. Absolutely. Do this now, do this now, and do this now, and do all your notes, and you're ready to go. Absolutely. The other thing to keep in mind is that everyone who has CAPS access, so not just caseworkers and supervisors, but everyone, we got analysts that have it, everybody that has it, has to take the required training. There's 12 or 16 different sessions to choose from. They're set up for 75-minute sessions. We think they'll be done in 60, but just in case, there's a lot of questions. Right now, less than half of the users have signed up, and we've had registration out for a couple weeks now. And those trainings start here in the last couple weeks of April. And if you don't get the training done, your access will be frozen until you take that training. And that will be based on the time that we may have available to provide an additional training session, which I can tell you in April is almost non-existent because we have so many staff out of the office with the investigations training academy. So please make sure that all of your staff in your county that have access to CAPS get signed up and takes one of those sessions. Any questions about that? Anything I forgot? I don't think so. The APS allocation recommendation, I'm staying today for PAC to present this to PAC. There won't be a vote on it. This is just the presenting the model, answering their questions, and then they can take it back to all the regions, and they'll come back in May and vote on it in May. We will have, right now we're using data from not quite the full year that we'll use. It's 12 months, but it's not the same 12 months we'll use for the final allocation. So next week we'll be pulling that. It's the data from April of 2017 through March of this year. Will be the 12 months that we use in that allocation. And so the data that we have in the model now, in the handout that Mindy sent, the spreadsheet that shows the proposed allocation, is only going to be off by about 2 months, so I don't expect that there's going to be any wild kind of swings in the amount of funding that you get. Also, it's my understanding that the JVC recommended in the long bill a 1% provider increase this year, and so there will be a little bit extra allocation coming to the counties. So what's on your spreadsheet as the full allocation amount will increase by 1%. I've asked our budget person to get that data to me. We'll get the final numbers out to the PAC by the end of next week, so that they have the final numbers for a couple weeks to review before the May meeting for the vote. And that's kind of where we're at with that. Questions about that? Okay. That was easy.
I would just reiterate, we did send you all the materials that went to the finance SubPAC, just so you had them. And for those who haven't been super involved on the allocation side, the sort of philosophy I think that the finance SubPAC has tried to, correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who know more about it, but is to really look at sort of developing a formula and a model that people can agree to and that makes sense based on the merits of it, and not look so much at each county or what does my county look like, right? But then we also have to couple that with, well, you should probably peek at what the numbers, just in case, like, for some reason every county loses or it doesn't make sense. So it's a little bit of a balance of both of those things. So we just gave you all the materials that they got so that you have them, but just know that that's sort of the way that they have been approaching it, is to look at sort of the whole big picture.
And just know that the numbers on the spreadsheet are not the final numbers. So, make sure that you don't get wedded to that number, and when your number comes in, it's $1,000 less, and you keep like, that's not what you said it was going to be, because those are like tentative. Yes.
Alright, we'll leave that on schedule. Anything else on those topics? If not, we'll move to brainstorming future agendas. So we thought we'd spend a little time at the end of the meeting. We know that we have some things lined up for May, and so we're planning on that, but then after May, what do we want to talk about in this group? What ideas do people have so we can start planning and getting people lined up and available and all of those things. So the things that we had left over on our list from previous meetings were, there was something about veterans issues, and I think we wanted to ask a little more about if anybody had brought that up, what specifically might be helpful. And then the only other one we have is the ARD steering. Oh, yeah. Is someone on the phone? Want to chime in? And then just the ARD steering committee, Jeanette couldn't be here today, but she said that she would work with us whenever they did have an update to let us know so we can put them on the agenda. It wouldn't be a huge, meeting long thing or anything, but just an update from them when it makes sense too. So those are the only really two things that we have. So
I also think that, like in May, we'll have, our sort of broad discussion about the behavioral health and that. But I'm thinking that we'll probably then maybe want to chunk that up into different, when we talk about, okay, now what, is there a piece that we want to have like further discussion about and sort of look at, more specific policy and that kind of stuff. So I would just encourage folks to next month when we're having that, sort of think about that. What do we need to dive down deeper into? Because part of our problem with behavioral health is it's so huge that you can't tackle it all at once. We certainly aren't going to be able to understand and do everything in a couple of hours. So I think that will also be, part of our larger agenda. But I would really, we did talk about veterans issues at the very beginning, and I'm curious if there are specific topics that we can certainly have folks come and, dive in, but I don't know.
Donna, I was just thinking about that, seeing that, and one of the things I would offer is Erin Tremaine, our division director for the Veterans Community Living Centers. It'd be a good presentation to raise your awareness of the resources, and they are scattered across the state. There's 5 of them. And he's a veteran himself, so he can speak to kind of trends that he's seeing in the military community as well.
So I think that would be good. And maybe, is there somebody who could maybe speak to the VDHCBS?
The VA, what?
The Veterans Directed HCBS program?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that, but we can research it.
That's the VA, correct? Yeah. I know a few people I can reach out to at the VA, but I'm not entirely sure.
I can reach out to some contacts there.
I know I hear from our Veteran Service Officer
Yep.
and our VDHCBS folks that, how can we better coordinate? I mean, they can refer back to one another,
Right.
but I think that there is sort of this dearth of knowledge about what the VDHCBS program does, and if the two of you, if CDHS and HICPA are, that's tough.
Fair.
So,
Fair enough. Absolutely.
we just sort of, integrating another system for VA. Let's bring the feds in if we don't have enough to navigate, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, I'll talk to Erin and we'll explore the HCBS.
I know that we were supposed to have 2 in our 6-county region as part of the projection, and not that it's a huge number, but I think we're looking at 8 to go on our second year. And so 8 individuals.
Oh.
So they had anticipated 2. In the next 5 years, we should have 2 in our 6-county region. So
wow.
As of year 2, we're looking at potentially 8. And so it is really great. I just, the projections are what they are, but so just sort of, what are they seeing statewide?
That's great. The other recommendation for a brainstorm item would be maybe maybe around June, right before we usually break, I think, in July. But maybe June, we revisit the mission and vision of this group, because we will have exercised it for about 6 months. And we can kind of review and evaluate, make any tweaks.
And then, one question I had was, because John had asked a question about the PACE ombudsman, and I'm not sure if it would be helpful, but would folks be interested at all in having the PACE ombudsman and or the long-term care ombudsman and Meyer come? I don't know how much you guys interact with, know about the ombudsman program, long-term care. That'd be helpful.
I think it would be, because I have been hearing concerns that, more about service delivery quality, things being scaled back, people being promised the moon. So I'm kind of surprised you haven't been hearing a little bit more. Maybe
Within PACE specifically?
Yeah, that are local. So it'd be good to hear what things about enrollment process.
And I know Leah and what's the ombudsman, both of them don't have a chance to talk to you guys, so she's very So as we have talked, we'll incorporate them.
I wonder if June would be a good time to have you come and bring back any thoughts on how the app changes are working, any questions around before we start doing the perpetrator due process. We don't need to, but I think that might be helpful. Because that's the meeting before we go live July 1 with the due process and what that looks like.
We can make a note to leave some time on the agenda. If we don't need it, we don't need it.
At some point, I know I've been hearing some, and we talked a little bit about it at the concrete discussion about frequent and consistent case manager, OLTC case manager training, and that, what does sort of that look like? So maybe if there's a plan or if there's I don't know. I've been hearing there's some questions about the frequency and the consistency of the training for OLTC case managers.
And then one other thing that I wanted to make folks aware of, I'm not sure if it's a specific agenda item that we need, but your area agencies on aging will be getting their instructions in the next couple of weeks to do their area plans. And so what that means is every 4 years they have to do an area plan that's submitted up to us at the state level, and then CHS develops a state plan on aging for 4 years that we submit as part of our federal funding for the Older Americans Act. So we don't have to submit our state plan until sometime next summer. But in anticipation of that, we want to give the AAAs plenty of time to do all their sort of data analysis on their local level, do community meetings, do focus groups, get all the information they need to develop their area plans for their regions. Part of that it obviously includes identifying gaps, identifying focus areas at the local level. So I would just kind of do a little plug right now for on their behalf that as they start working on those, they may be reaching out to you. In fact, I'm going to suggest they reach out to you. And different regions obviously are more connected with the counties than others, but that's something we've talked about here is really making sure that there is that connection. And this is probably a really good opportunity for you all to align forces with them. And even if, it's things like if they're doing a focus group and we wanted to join that just to hear what communities stakeholder feedback is and in your region, that sort of thing, or if you have information on gaps in your area that you want to make sure they try and include. So, so just be on the lookout for that, and maybe there is some point over the summer or something that we kind of, I don't know, have them come over. Not really sure how that fits to agenda item, other than kind of what it might be happening.
I know also the AAAs are looking at, and continuously looking at, you know, as aging changes and as the people that are 60 and over, because all the Older Americans Act calls for is 60 and over. And so as those change, and will the demographics and the characteristics of that demographic change over the next 4 years, is what we are providing the same thing that we should be providing for the next 4 years? Or are we seeing a different, you know, a shift where, you know, the money might be spent better elsewhere? Here's a new, you know, a new initiative that maybe we could partner in. Or as things change in this world, the AAA is maybe sometimes connected and sometimes not connected, but maybe that, you know, just so the integration and change. So not only with the counties, but other things that are other community agencies that, you know, that pop up. You know, different case management agencies. I mean, there's case management in the AAA, so if case management agencies come up through conflict-free, then how does that impact you know, the area agencies on aging and their case management, all of that kind of stuff.
One more thing on that I forgot to mention is that the AAA C4A is their association. They did receive a grant from Next 50 to do the CASOA, which is the Community Assessment of Older Adults. So some of you may have seen the 2010 statewide version of that, and then some of the AAAs have done their own local versions over the past 8 years. But now they are working, and we'll be supporting them in this, is to do a CASOA for the whole state and broken out by region. And what that is it's a survey directly of older adults, and it's like statistically valid. They really oversample all of that stuff. So it will have some really good information, again, about your communities. And so they're contracting with a group that will do it, but I'm thinking around the fall is when we'll get those results. So maybe that could be something, just a planning ahead kind of thing, is to have, you know, them come and present the results here and have some discussion with them. Because it's going to be, obviously it's not a tool just for them, it's for all of us, right? It will be a public document that we can all use. So it should be pretty informative.
I heard that there are a number of area agencies on aging who are putting in their own money to say, well, I want 500 more in, you know, in this area to really get, you know, to the needs of some of the symptoms. So hopefully there'll be some good information.
Yeah, anyone on the phone have other suggestions for future agenda items? We've all been pretty quiet. Man's not there today.
We had been talking earlier, I don't know if the task group would be the best place for this one, relative to the findings memo and the intent thing that I raised with you in the email, just sort of that, whether or not intent gets, is part of that process.
It's the December 17th draft operational memo. That one became really good. A couple of years.
June 1st, is it?
Yeah, you can provide the practice change. It's around, John, I didn't open John's email, but yeah, but it came out December 17th, but it's about findings. I think that's about severity levels. Okay. Really, that's kind of today county. I'm starting on.
Good to know. So that draft memo is no longer
Draft.
Yeah.
So that probably should go out. That you know, we sent this out for your, you know, to take a look at it. Why did that come out? December 17th. Oh, way back. Yeah. And so people are still sort of expecting the, you know, real one.
June 1st.
And are looking at June 1st and preparing for all of these to happen June 1st. So if they're not going to happen June 1st, we should probably
And it was broader than severity levels, so I don't know if.
It was part of the practice change, and that's what we're still waiting to kind of finalize.
That we think we'll talk about a task group in May, ideally, right, so that could work for that. The other thing that came up this morning was the confidentiality of APS. Records and conversations, and I don't know if that's the place to talk about that either, but there's some.
Yes, we're seeing a lot of violations happening. So we're gonna address it for the committee meeting in May.
That's okay. We looked about it as, as far as within the county. So how does that look like county supports itself? To get it working. So how do we, when we have maybe we have APS and chocolate or the same at different times. How does that work? It's pretty clear if it's a joint support. It's we're happening at two different times. So training meetings, what time are those?
That Wednesday is this.
Second or fourth, it was something like that. I wrote it down yesterday.
And I think the point about the memos is well taken, because that's something that I'd say I thought about, is that maybe when we had for the severity levels one, and then also for the practice change one, we had put drafts out to the task group for their consideration. But I think when we do that going forward, two things. One, we'll not put them in the actual memo format, so there's no confusion that this is just a draft policy practice that we're talking about, but it's not anywhere, it's not becoming a thing yet, right? And so just to make that distinction and make it a little more clear. And then the other thing that we can do is just put a memo out saying, we're in the process of working on this with the task group, and then nothing is finalized yet, but please know practice change is coming. We've been talking to you all about it. We just haven't finalized what that looks like because it's a lot more complicated. So that would be more of an information memo, just to keep those of you that know about the fact that we're working on it in the loop. I will have to admit that I had intended to do that in the past month or so, but have not had time to get that language on paper. So I apologize for that, because that's part of our sort of ongoing communication, making sure everyone's caught up, and so we'll make sure that happens.
There is a memo that the caseworkers and supervisors are getting at the investigations training. That's the draft of the severity levels memo. And they're just being told that, if this passes in the rule package tomorrow, then this is coming down the pike, and we want them to read it and become familiar with it, and something more official will be coming down the road.
And this is a different memo than the
one that John is drafting.
Yeah.
So this section has to do with the making of findings, the determination of those findings. So I don't know if that section is.
Does that one have the table in it with the examples?
Yeah, in terms of severity level. Yeah.
With the table?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that one is still in draft form. So it won't become official now until we have the rules passed tomorrow, and know what the board is going to pass. That's why that hasn't been able to be finalized yet.
So if the rules pass and if that becomes a real memo, it sounds to me like there are questions about that memo. So
maybe we could, is that what you're saying, John, is before we send it out, we'd like to have some further discussion on what that is? Okay. Good to know.
So that should probably address it in the task group meeting.
So that whichever memo is off the table, we can just be clear about which memo is off the table. Yeah, that we're scrapping this because maybe it's not. No, I don't know what to do. That's our communication. Yes, this memo is there. Yep. Well, it was something with 3 rule packets and, they went through code together and it's good. Yep, it's moved quickly.
Got it. All right, we're a little bit over time, I think, so any final thoughts or feedback before we conclude? All right, thanks everyone.